Buggies, a physically unpleasant woman who reeks of urine and marble sweat on her stout neck has a wicked stench. Laundry, on the other hand, is described as a worthy, someone who only believes in the worldly reasons and logics, but Laundry is mesmerized by Buggy's stories. Another aspect of Laundry's character is that he believes in the publication of the stories and in the importance of the published word. Buggies plays pranks on the narrator, hiding from him in the park and sending mongrels to scare him. Buggies wanders between physical realities. She is at times a bear and at times a woman. She is a bear woman who physically lives in Oakland, California, and in her stories, she lives in the mythical world of Midders. Buggies' life is formed by her ability through a game she plays. Through the Wanaki game, Buggies introduces her listener, Laundry, to her stories. While playing this game, she warns Laundry not to publish her stories in written words, because these words are dead voices that lost their links with nature. This portrays the concept of storytelling as an essential part of Native American identity. Traditionally, Native Americans told their stories orally. There was no single author to a given story, because the entire community was involved in shaping and describing it. This is why Buggies warns again and again to the author not to print her stories. The Wanaki game that Buggies plays is an exemplification of method by which all elements of nature interact by sharing one body. Buggies, through these stories, transform into all the characters described in the Wanaki game. The game is played by picking a card from a deck of 7 cards, each representing a different picture of a bear, flea, squirrel, mantis, crow, beaver, and finally, trickster, the card which allows its player to choose his or her own image. Buggies' relation to the Wanaki game is described by the author as Through her stories, Buggies helps Laundry achieve the understanding and to see beyond reason and logic. Dead Voices is a comparison between changing worlds. Buggies represents the traditional world. Her beliefs are traditional, but she is able to adapt to this changing world. She lives in a new world city and still is able to safeguard her beliefs of her traditional world. The common myth is that the Native Americans are tragic people and their cultural identities are getting lost in this modern world. Dead Voices shatters that myth and argues that the life of Native Americans is full of comic figures and natural humor, and that comedy and humor is the key to their survival. Gerald Vizenor proves his argument through the help of a trickster. What is a trickster? In most of Native American cultures, the trickster varies depending upon which tribal tradition is telling the story. Generally, the trickster's physical attributes are variously portrayed in a number of regional cultures, traditions. In the far west as coyote, in the northwest and Arctic as raven, in the east as hare, in the north woods as wolverine, on the plains as spider. The manifestation of the tricksters varies from tribe to tribe. However, the importance of the tricksters as a Native American cultural icon does not. It's difficult to pin down the tricksters to any fixed set of characteristics or given forms. Part of his or her attraction is defiance of classification and analysis. Sometimes the tricksters appears as human, sometimes as animal. In Dead Voices, the trickster's figure of Buggies is clearly matched with the traditional characteristics of the Native American trickster. Buggies throughout the novel warns the narrator not to publish her stories. Buggies believes that the stories are meant to be passed from mouth to mouth and not to be told through publications and books. For Buggies, the act of writing a story down traps it on the page and kills the voice. She fears the authority of written word and is unable to see how the written stories can function as a trickster. But narrator is so mesmerized by her stories that as the novel progresses, the stories become more and more interesting, so interesting that the narrator ends up publishing these stories, driven with the urge to share these stories to the rest of the world. In spite of Buggies' warnings, the narrator of Dead Voices chooses nevertheless to publish these stories, a few years after Buggies disappears. But this choice does not run opposite to the teachings given to him by Buggies herself. Although she warned him against writing these stories and recording them in Dead Voices, she also impelled him to imagine his own way, the story she had told him. Writing these stories and publishing them is thus his way of imagining them. In the end, Dead Voices is a collection of stories open to the reader's imagination. Dead Voices is not a novel with a single meaning. It has a lot of interpretations, and two opposite meanings could be right. For example, the moon has various shapes, and on a given night, if we see half moon, that doesn't mean that the moon is not full.